Jen Vandermeer, and this is Dulcie Madden.
How's it going?
I think we'll first introduce ourselves, and I'll just start by saying Dulcie is awesome because she only has a half MBA.
Half an MBA, that's right.
And she's a founder and CEO, and she described her job today as founder and CEO as all the things that aren't coding at a company called Rest Devices. So
Yep.
have you explain what that means.
Yeah, so we've developed a new kind of wearable sensor that we're integrating into a couple different kinds of consumer products, most notably a new kind of baby monitor, which I'll talk about peripherally a little bit today. But I work with fantastic engineers who do both mechanical hardware design as well as software, and then I do everything that's not that. So feel free to talk to me about it afterwards if you're interested.
And I'm at Luminary Labs, where I do a lot of work in open data, health tech, and also investing for advice for big companies and investing for small companies to build the ecosystem of all of the startups we need to enter health tech space right now. So this is also a call to action for everybody to put down your tools of optimizing for ads and come optimize for health. Okay. Clicking.
Yeah.
So the first few things we wanted to talk about were this concept of active versus passive collection. Anyone in the audience a quantified selfer?
Bueller.
Awesome. Not a one.
Bueller.
Okay.
Okay.
Clicker's bad? Clicker's bad. Okay, that's good to know. And shifting target populations and networks, and this idea of how the use of these devices actually leads to some kind of decision making and some kind of behavior change. Better clicker's coming, and here we go. Okay, so active data collection. This is probably something like Runkeeper. Anyone here use a running app? Okay, so Runkeeper is like a single feedback device. You run, you tweet, you see over time how much you run. You get some analytics on how much you run. Anyone wearing a Fitbit right now? Want to admit it? You guys really aren't quantified selfers, okay. Dulcie, are you wearing one?
I am not wearing one now, but I do have one.
And I've been known to wear an up. Okay, so then, you want to take this one?
Yeah, totally. So is everyone familiar with the concept of a Fitbit? No. Okay. So if you go back, the Fitbit is basically an enhanced pedometer. You know, pedometers have been around since the 60s, way before. It's basically just an accelerometer that tracks your steps as you move throughout the day. They're able to take that one piece of information that they sort of organically collect through a small device that you wear on your person. That syncs up to the cloud via Bluetooth, and then it feeds into this portal where then you have to manually input all this other information about activities, weight, sleep, heart, blood pressure, glucose. And as they aggregate all that data, then they start to pull out sort of different analytics about how you're performing, about your activity level, your health. You can sort of socialize it and work with your friends, at competitions, et cetera. It's interesting to me because Fitbit is, by most accounts, a very popular company. It's old technology, though, right? So it's an accelerometer, super simple chip. Form factor is pretty cool. This is more or less the same user interface as like Weight Watchers, which has been around for decades. But yet they've put it in this cool package that's quantified and sort of tech savvy, and it's really, really popular.
Here's another idea, and we're moving into something called passive data collection. So active data collection is like, you need to be present, you're turning on your mobile app, you're using a device, you're actively engaged with something, and the experience prompts and calls you to do something about that experience. Passive data collection is a newer idea in the health tech quantified self space. The idea that you're not even, you're conscious and you may be opted into this, but you're not really doing anything to send data to the system. One of the best examples is Asthmopolis. This is a regular inhaler that you use during an asthma attack, but there's a sensor inside that will ping the system anytime the inhaler is used. So what that then gives Asthmopolis is not just a business model of asthma inhalers, but a whole other view onto where someone is having an asthma attack and a full map of the universe of when that happens. That kind of data can inform public policy. It can inform doctor-patient conversations. It can form the interaction between that boy and his parents or caregivers in a way to make productively useful decisions about many things in our society. Common Sensing is a startup out of Boston that's doing this for diabetes insulin pens. Similar idea. When this idea was recently presented at Health Data Palooza in Washington, someone said, the Asthmopolis for diabetes. So same idea. Every time an insulin pen is injected, the sensor pings the network. So now one of the biggest problems in diabetes is this concept of adherence, not knowing when a patient is really taking their insulin in relationship to their blood glucose. It's a very data-driven disease, and it's a very data-driven conversation at the doctor's office. With this kind of system, that conversation falls to the background. The data is present. You know when the patient is taking the drug, and the patient knows when they took the drug, and it's no longer requires this conscious feedback loop of having to do what's done right now, which is normally logging it in a paper and pen notebook, and sometimes just getting it wrong because you forget to do it.
Yep.
And we're seeing this this more and more of like how sensors can just help you do anything, but really happening behind the scenes, not active and present in the conversation. This is my first lesson in Quantified Self. I worked on this device called a Stressor Racer. You can still buy it on Amazon. And it was designed to teach you how to breathe in moments of anxiety to lower your heart rate variability, the space in between your heartbeats. And when we first started working on it, the founder wanted to sell this to yoga instructors. And we'll talk about this. It's very interesting related to Dulcie's company. So we talked to yoga instructors and said, wouldn't you want to sell this device or at least refer it to your client base? And all of the yoga instructors said, no, it's the last thing I want to look at is a device telling me about my body. So instead, sorry, I'll go back. We went to people that were suffering from anger management and anxiety and learned that these people really were challenged with having a sense of themselves. And they ended up becoming the first users of the product. And advancing.
Yeah, the other slide's at the very, very end.
Yeah, that's okay. And we'll get there. Cool.
Cool. And so that's sort of something that we've thought a lot about in terms of the product that we're building at our company in the context of a baby monitor is do you actually want to use this? And then what are sort of the keys to getting people to use it? You guys have probably heard of a company called Nike, I'm guessing. Hopefully. And something that they've done is they've taken a product that's essentially the same thing as a Fitbit, but they crush sort of the user interface and the design, right? So I know a lot of guys who specifically use the FuelBand, and it's because they love the user interface. It's got this level of sort of competition where you work towards a number of points, and then it gives you positive reinforcement, and it looks really, really, really cool. And that in and of itself is just big business right there. Can you click through the next one? And then the other piece that we sort of wanted to talk about is sort of this notion of why you're quantifying yourself and for whom you're doing it. We can sort of talk about, do you want to kick off the conversation about that, and then we can talk about the community?
Yeah, I mean, and I think the biggest thing, it's actually great to have an audience of people who aren't crazily lifelogging. I think that's why we want to get into the conversation more quickly, is this idea of, where are you in the continuum of even wanting to? How many of you people here are like interested in the concept of lifelogging? You're going to run out and download an app or buy one of this piece of equipment and just start looking at things. Okay, and why would you not do that is really the question that we're curious about, because we're not here to like just build these systems so that everybody becomes obsessed with every data point about their health. There's a bigger reason why we want to do this.
Right. And so if you're doing it for yourself, right, like we both own Fitbits, Jen has an Up, I know a bunch of people who have a FuelBand, and there's sort of this like initial adoption rate where everyone uses it, and then at some point they're like, meh, like I can kind of guess how much I'm running on a given day. If you're using a product like the Zeo, which sort of quantifies your sleep, chances are that if you're an adult, you know that when you're going to sleep that you're either drinking too much caffeine, you had too many beers, you're going to have to wake up too early, you smoke too many cigarettes, whatever. And so most adults sort of are aware of what their actual behavior is, and so there's adoption and then almost pretty instantaneous attrition in terms of adherence to actually using a quantified self tool. However, what we've sort of seen is that if the who that you're using it for that particular tool changes to be an external factor, say it's your baby, if you're trying to get pregnant, if it is one of your parents and you're trying to figure out what they're doing with type 2 diabetes or otherwise, if it is a child with diabetes or asthma, then it suddenly becomes so much more important, and people are really interested in adhering to sort of the quantification of problems as they arise, as well as their everyday behavior. And so these are just a few examples of apps that relate within my space, within the baby and family space. The first one is Ovuline, which measures women's fertility and basically helps them track what that is in case they're trying to get pregnant or not get pregnant. The second two are sort of quantified baby apps to be able to measure sleeping, diaper changes, and breastfeeding, as well as sleep schedules. And I actually know a decent number of moms who actually use both these tools, the latter two, to sleep train their babies. And so you'll see them obsessively managing the data, and then you'll start to see these sort of graphs sort of optimized so that their babies are sleeping better throughout the night, which is a new shift in sort of the quantified self movement to thinking about how you can quantify your baby. And it can be sort of terrifying, and we'll talk about that a little bit as well. We can skip through this. Yeah.
So there's this concept that I uncovered with that Stressor Racer product early on, which is this concept of mindfulness loops, and a larger concept from systems thinking, which is there's a single feedback loop that new time entrepreneurs typically go for. Something happens, you make a decision, there's a consequence, you see that consequence in the interface, and that information on its own is supposed to trigger change. Anyone here who's ever logged their calories into either a notebook or an app knows this experience and knows that the experience of doing that has diminishing returns. There's this larger concept of, in systems thinking, double feedback loop, or in mindfulness, dynamic change over time, where in that experience, there's something about the cues in the system that enable you to really get a new mental framework for how to think about your life, and new strategies and tools for making better decisions. It's a much more meta-level understanding, and a great example is the idea of meditation and mindfulness, that even if you used a tool like a web interface or a mobile interface or a device to make you aware, over time, those habits become back-of-the-brain ideas, and we compete with trains to talk about this. But that mindfulness becomes something that's a goal, not actually needing the device, having the device fall into the background.
Yeah.
And this idea that I see over and over again, working in the spaces of diabetes, depression, asthma, chronic diseases, that while everybody wants to be mindful, for a number of people that suffer chronic diseases, they're past the point of no return. Their lives are going to be data-driven to a certain extent, and we want to enable that. So if this is for extreme stress and anger management, there's other continuums you could add here. But the kind of the real opportunity is to design devices for the right modality, the right mindset, the right experience level, with the goal that not everyone has the luxury of being born and acculturated to be mindful, but that we can all kind of move closer on that continuum.
Yep. Yeah. Do you want to talk? I will. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think something else I'm thinking about in terms of the context of mindfulness and what we do at Rest Devices with the baby monitor, and especially as I think about sort of the quantification of self, is this concept of, do you really need to establish every single moment of your life or of your baby's life, and who's going to be watching that, and why is this even close to being important? How many of you guys are parents by any chance? Okay, cool. So we're building a new kind of baby monitor, and I'll just talk about that for a little bit in the context of fear, I think, that can monitor a baby's respiration, their skin temperature, body position, activity level, and audio, and send it all in real time to your smartphone. And the context in which we're designing this is for first-time moms, who some of you guys might remember being a first-time mom or a dad. You wake up in the middle of the night and you're like, oh my God, is my baby still breathing? And so we're there to give you information on your app to let you know that, yeah, totally, your baby's fine, go back to sleep. You don't have to run in there and check and see whether she or he is breathing. I get a lot of feedback from investors, from people in sort of sales channel, everything else, about wanting to play up sort of either the tiger mom or the fear aspect of it, and sort of seeking to amplify anxiety as driving sales for a product. And I think there's a lot of different ways that if you're thinking about quantification of self, where you can use data as sort of like the scary lurky thing in the back of being like, are you exercising enough? You will die soon. Or, your baby's not going to be okay. And I think it's really interesting for companies as they think about aggregating all of that data, what it's going to be useful for, how they're going to message that, how it's going to be important to people as they move throughout their lives, either as individuals or parents or otherwise. And for us, we definitely don't want to do that. We're all about sort of reassurance and reducing stress rather than adding to it.
So anyone interested in, just startup opportunities in the space, we're happy to talk, answer questions. There is huge opportunity here as down in the US accountable care happens. The ability for systems like this to be able to predict health outcomes and also to reveal previously unseen activity of like what really impacts healthy lives, what really helps us avoid chronic disease. Mm-hmm. These become huge commercial opportunities, huge startup opportunities, and we're looking for conscious, humanistic, awesome coders and designers to join the movement.
Yeah. Awesome. We've got a lot of time.
We can still talk about something that's really interesting to us is a shift in the design from the self to the design for community. This is something I think we're going to see a lot in the health tech space. We've seen it in social, where you design the user experience not for the kind of more short-sighted, baser level human instincts of selfishness or self-aggrandizement or being able to kind of look at yourself in the mirror through social data every day to really wanting to contribute. And we see the shift in user experience and business model development from this design for the self. How do I quantify every aspect of my life, hang all these devices on my body, and perfect myself, to how do I become a better citizen of the world? A great example is Dulcie's company, where she's going to be helping moms get a better sense and handle on what can be a really terrifying experience in our North American culture of having a baby. When you might, typically average woman who has a baby in North America, it's been a while since she's seen a child in action, and that first experience is sometimes lonely. Potentially you're, in a new city, far away from your parents, and your parents are 30 plus years away from remembering what it was like with you. You look for advice from friends, but there you are in the middle of the night. You have maybe the ability to go onto a baby chat room with moms to talk about this. But what is there to really help? And this way of thinking about designing for that interaction between the mom and her baby, between the mom, her baby, and other caregivers, the father, the nanny, the parent around the corner, the person down the street who might be helping out, it really becomes an interesting way for us to think about designing for community.
Yeah, and you have to think about designing for the use case over time, right? So if you're a first-time parent, in those first 3 to 6 months, you are super freaked out about what's happening with your child. Once you start to settle into the role, or if you're a second and third-time parent, that instant anxiety tends to evolve. And so as a product, you have to really think about, all right, you're less concerned about the real-time data, then how do you start to sort of aggregate all that information and make it useful? And that's something that I think the Quantified Self community is really struggling with, right? Sure, I walked 10,000 steps today, but who cares? And so the biggest thing that we're trying to do, and it's going to be interesting to see how this sort of evolves as we collect more and more information, is if you breastfeed your child at this time, will he or she go to sleep faster, and will they sleep better? Can you monitor diaper changes for better diaper training, when you have to get to potty training? How are you able to manage the relationship if you are, have a nanny between communicating what's happening with your baby all day, what's actually going on with them, to being able to manage that transition of care throughout the day and onwards? I think it's going to be really tricky because I think a lot of sort of the quantified self systems that are out there, they have huge amounts of information. They keep it very proprietary and close to the chest. And it's almost like there's either too little in terms of actionability or there's too much data that they haven't figured out the right algorithm or systems to actually do anything that makes a difference for people on an ongoing basis. I mean, I don't use my Fitbit. I want to, but I don't. So it's sort of an ongoing product failure in terms of continuing through the life cycle of the product.
Okay.
So, yeah.
I want to take definitely have one question here. We'll start.
You mentioned with the Nike app,
Yeah.
encouragement and a good user interface.
Yeah.
Really was important. Is there anything else that way that engage or adds?
I think from everyone I've talked to about... Repeat the question. So you asked about whether for the Nike FuelBand, the user interface and also sort of the encouragement tend to be what gets people using the product and continuing to use the product. Is there anything else? I think what Nike has done super well and why they crush the market also is that it seamlessly integrates into their products already, right? So you buy Nike running shoes between the FuelBand and Nike Plus system and everything else, and I would imagine, given their share of the market, that they're developing some pretty cool technology, that's part of what it is. So they've already got the wearable piece down. I do think that the user interface is phenomenally important. If you look at Jawbone, which is the highest valuation private company right now, they just bought Massive Health specifically for their UI UX team because they recognize that how you interact with that app and how cool it looks is a really, really important part. I think for any Quantified Self thing, thinking about gamification, both individually in terms of goal setting as well as across a community. Like I was talking with Jen about her parents, and you might start using the Up again to help get your parents more active.
Yeah, a personal story. I try all these devices, every single one of them, just to get the experience. So I tried the Jawbone Up, used the user interface for about 4 weeks, and got the lay of the land. I live in New York City. I walk 20 minutes a day to work. And at least it helped give me that nice mental double loop feedback of oh, urban life is good for your health. And that walk is the thing I really have to protect every day to and from work. Without that, I kind of fall off the rails. So it gave me that. The mindfulness occurred, and I put the device away. A few months ago, my mom kind of shifted. She's been healthy all of her life. She, I think through taking various heart medications, started gaining weight. And she's now in that kind of danger zone for pre-diabetes. So she needs to really start watching her exercise and eating habits. What's great about the Up system is I can join a really tiny social network with her, me, and my dad, and I can watch what they're doing every day. We can have a conversation about it. I can see how many steps they're taking. We can go so far as to photograph what we're eating and share it with each other. And we can become more conscious, as she's someone who was always super conscious, but probably needs to build that presence back up into her life as she gets older, and it becomes this really interesting way for us to stay engaged and connected. And the way that technologies like Skype have helped, I think these life-logging technologies will change family dynamics, will change care, and will help what is, I think, one of the deepest unmet needs where there's, I think, huge personal and commercial opportunity is helping people like me that have a 4-year-old and 70-year-old parents care for the beings in my life.
Yeah. And then the last thing that I'd say, is that I also think that the industrial design makes a really, really big difference. So think about the use case of what you're trying to collect data through. The wristbands have clearly done a good job because they can sort of look sort of bro-y and fratty, but they also work for women, so no one really minds wearing it. For my product, everyone's trying to figure out what's the use case for babies and what can you integrate that isn't going to be a total pain in the ass for a parent to integrate into working with their, and caring for their baby every day. And then you can see that across a variety of different things too. But design really matters. Yeah, thanks. Yep.
What's the name of that watch that was developed in the US and I think they sold out? You have to put your name on the labels to get
Pebble, is that?
Pebble or Bases?
Basis.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it seems to record almost every biological element, right? It's a lot more than footsteps, and I don't know how it figures out calories and heat. But
Yeah, it's heat transfer of your skin to the watch. So each and every one of these devices is looking at even cheap cell phone technology as a way to produce completely novel data sets that help these startups, like Ginger.io is one of them, can leapfrog researchers in science that have been trying to solve for Alzheimer's and diabetes by just thinking about what is the capability of an accelerometer in a cell phone. What can I learn from the frequency of social interaction, and what can that tell me about a person's mental state? And the belief, the investment thesis in this company is that technology will disrupt the entire psychiatric industry by being a better predictor of someone's mental state than a 1-hour session with a doctor with years and years of training and the manual of psychological disorders.
Yeah.
So it's pretty profound stuff that's going on. Big bets are being made, all based on very inexpensive sensors.
Yeah. And it's interesting also because Ginger.io is leveraging your cell phone, which is something that you use every day anyways, right? It's usually ours are in the audio room, but all of you are sitting with your cell phone. So it is literally with you all the time. Something like the Basis it's something that we think about a lot, right? Because you can jam a bunch of sensors into something, and then you have to think about accuracy. For like pulse oximetry, you have to maintain contact with the skin. Is that something that people want to go through? If you're thinking about a consumer product, you have to think through durability, and so you have to sort of optimize, like, what's the data that people actually need? What are they trying to solve for? And then what is the product that you can actually create from both a sensor design, accuracy, bill of materials perspective to be viable as a company. There's a lot of other companies that are out there, like Body Media just got bought by Jawbone as well. And they do a lot of respiration sensing and pulse oximetry stuff, and they got bought clearly for their patent portfolio. So.
The Mayo just opened up their developer platform yesterday. They're an armband that does similar things to Bases. Yep. So we'll see a ton of these companies be developed. The ones that will be successful, not just develop a great piece of hardware, but will create developer ecosystems. Yep. What I love about Dulcie's company is open data platforms. You're able to port that data from your experience at that company and connect it to other experiences, not necessarily you as the user, but developer ecosystems that can help connect these systems. And the winners won't necessarily just win in the physical product design distribution. They're gonna win based on that overall ecosystem that they build and what they help contribute to.
Yeah. Yo, sorry, go ahead. How do you monitor diaper changes in a baby? So actually, there's been a few companies who have tried to do this. Our initial proprietary technology that we have is really good at detecting moisture, respiration, and pressure. And so we've actually integrated it into diaper manufacturing lines because it can basically just be steamrolled into the process. The hardest part is there was just a New York Times article that came out on Tuesday, actually, about a company that's doing this, and it puts a QR code on the front of the diaper to be able to let you know if the diaper changes and if it's soiled or if just wet. The hardest thing with that is, again, it's the use case of having to take a QR code every time and log that. And so the biggest thing with diapers is you change your baby's diaper like 1 billion times a day. I mean, not really, but like you go through a lot of diapers, and so what's going to be cheap, and then is a parent not going to have to change about it? The biggest thing is thinking about if you want to make it a wireless technology, so it syncs up automatically to your cell phone, and then how do you actually make the form factor for that so small that a baby's not going to notice, or that a parent isn't going to freak out, you know? So we're working on it. We have prototypes. It's really fun to test.
And then there's also the baby's scream, which helps as a very prime sensor.
Yeah, totally. That also works. You can just know, yeah. Yeah. Sorry? No, well, so our sensors are capacitative, so if you add moisture, it changes the capacitance, basically, and then you can pick that up and measure it. Totally, yeah. And so in the instance of wearing a shirt, like if you're wearing a onesie or a shirt or otherwise, you can tell if the sensor's being saturated because if you're sweating while you're sleeping, et cetera, et cetera. But it also totally works for diapers.
Once it's wet, or does it?
You know, I'll have to go back and look. I think that, diapers are, we haven't integrated them into cloth diapers. I don't know anyone who has. Our sensors are completely machine washable, so they are durable, but the use case of a diaper is one time only, so you check it. Yeah. Yeah. Anyone?
Well, I have a question for you guys. What do you think of, if you had a baby tomorrow, would you put a onesie to lifelog your baby? Or raise your hands. No. I'm curious to know, like, resistors. Why? This is customer discovery for Dulcie.
Yeah.
Particularly want to hear from parents.
Yeah.
So I think the danger for me is losing that human contact with your child.
Totally.
And so there's something about getting up in the middle of the night, going into the room, seeing your child sleeping there, forming that bond. There's a whole lot of things that don't happen when you open your eyes, flip open your cell phone, and look at a screen. So for me, my concern with parenting is, and we were just talking about it at lunchtime, is,
Yeah.
Also that sort of following your child around all the time into college on their Facebook page and something like now, which is sending you a picture every day and monitoring. Where's the balance between also allowing your children to grow on their own, make their own decisions?
Not overdoing it, yeah.
Really, the whole parent-child monitoring interaction from when they're born to when they go away to college. I think it's a complicated subject.
It's super complicated. I'd say.
When our kids were
Yeah.
Shut the door.
Totally. Yeah. I'm the fifth of 6 kids. My mom was like, oh my God, just go outside and never come back, you know? So yeah, it's a really tough line to walk, right? Because you don't want to distort that human connection that a mom or a dad would have with their child. You don't want to present data or a user interface in any way that is going to, if you're showing a respiration trace and it flatlines and you're a parent who looks at that, you're going to be like, right? And so how do you sort of manage creating that really primal instinct in terms of what's happening with your baby? How do you also, a lot of parents that we've talked to, every parent that we've talked to has been like, I am tired all the time, and whatever I can do to sleep better or to have my baby start to sleep better is something that becomes really apparent, especially around that 4 to 8 month range, right? When you're just sort of dying for sleep. And so there's a lot of really human factors. There's a lot of sort of like data factors and then also user interface factors that we certainly haven't perfected in any way, shape, or form. I think the other part of that is, I don't know if we ever will. No one on my team is a parent. And so, which is interesting. So we literally can't make any assumptions about anything that we're doing, because it's not like I can be like, oh, well, with my baby. And so we have to extensively user test everything we do, right? So go out into the field, talk to moms, talk to dads, go to a bunch of different demographics, because we can't assume that like what works for us is going to work for anyone else, because that's not us, right? We're developing this for an audience that is not me.
So you need to hire some parents.
Yeah, we have a mommy advisory board, and then like a bunch of parents who we work with really closely, as well as obviously larger alpha and beta tester populations. But we can't make any assumptions, like literally, because you never know, and every parent's different. So you sort of aggregate a mean of data. Yeah. Do you have a question?
Well, I was just going to say, by
Yeah.
contrast, I have a 3-year-old, and I would love to
Yeah.
be like a latchkey mom, but she's juvenile diabetic, so
Wow.
I have to be a helicopter mom, even though it's
Yeah.
not in my nature. So having some of that data as a way for me to sort of have her from afar and she not feel like
Yep.
I'm an overbearing, but I can still monitor, what I sort of need to monitor health-wise.
Yep.
It would be a really interesting balance for
Yeah.
the whole community.
Yeah, and we see, I think that's
Yeah,
a perfect
totally.
roundup. There's this corollary, we saw it with the stress device, like people that are mindful yoga instructors versus people who had been diagnosed with anger management issues and had to go on a protocol, and where the device really helped them. There's a continuum of the parent who's intuitive, who might have the life luxury of sleeping anyway, like going back to bed, being able to fall back to sleep early, or a day where they can kind of follow the sleep schedule of the child. And the other continuum is a parent who is fairly isolated, doesn't have a lot of family support, might have to get up and do 2 jobs tomorrow, and really wants to take care of their child and be there for them, but really needs a heck of a lot of support about how to do this without the practical experience of a parent or other caregivers nearby, and without without the ability to just kind of roll with it. And so it's really that continuum we're thinking about in all of this quantified self, with the goal being, the ultimate experience would be great. It'd be great if we all could just flip a switch and be mindful. It would be great if there weren't chronic diseases where you had to track all of this data in your child's life. That would be the dream. And essentially these devices are an assist to when you find yourself in a different situation.
Yeah. We've got time for one more question if anyone's got one. Cool.
Cool.
All right.
Well, thanks. We'll be up here and in the tents, and thanks for coming.
Thank you.